Welcome into today's episode of Pushing the Pile. Mike Renner, Kyle Long. We're rolling through our series ranking position groups across the NFL. We've done quarterbacks, we've done receivers, we've done offensive line, we've done running back rooms. Now we're turning aside to the defense, and we're going to front sevens, Kyle. We are doing DTs, edges, linebackers, that unit. And how I went about this, at least, was including linebackers, their work as run defenders and pass rushers, not coverage. So trying to separate that aspect out to rank them, because that's like, we talk about front sevens, that's what you're really talking about, is the run defense and how they rush the passer. And when we do back sevens, when we do secondaries, then I'll include linebackers, at least in my rankings, and how they fare in coverage. So that's my methodology. How was your 4th of July, though? How was the holiday for you, buddy?
It was a great 4th of July. And before I get into that, I just want to add a little, note to your descriptors for this list that you made, because I always appreciate the way that you look at things. And I would say it's just which unit would do best in a 9-on-7 situation in practice. Like the group that just, the offense struggles every single day when they're going against these units. Those are the ones we're going to be talking about. I like that you added the ability to pass rush in there as well, because obviously that goes further than just the 9-on-7 period. So I'd say the unit that does the best job in 1-on-1 pass rush and does the best job in 9-on-7. Those are the ones who are going to be the best on the field. 4th of July was good. It's, as we talked about, it's one of my favorite holidays. It's an easy holiday to do as well. Get a couple little flags, put a big flag up, just be proud to be an American, make hot dogs. You don't have to do producer Harry and I were talking about this before. He said, look, you don't have to make turkey. And plus kids don't even want to eat the turkey at Thanksgiving and stuff like that. So hot dogs are a big winner. It was great. I wish the fireworks would wrap up a little bit earlier so my kids could sleep. What did you do?
How late were they going off by you?
Dude, I mean, they're going off until 12:30. So, at a certain point, the girls go down at around 6:30, 7 o'clock. And at about 9:30, my wife was just like, let's just grab Frankie, our eldest, out of bed, and we'll go watch some fireworks where they're in the street. So we did that. It was a real experience for her and for us, getting to see her outside when it's dark. It's never that case for us. So that was a lot of fun.
So on July 4th, my wife had to work, so we celebrated the day before. But what's funny is my dog, Riggins, he is impervious to fireworks. Like, how like everyone complains about their dog on 4th of July, barking at all the noises, whatever, staying up late. He has never once in his life cared about fireworks. But anytime there's a storm, he will literally be shaking, like lightning for some reason. He will be quivering. We were actually driving in the car last week when a storm popped up. Lightning comes. He's in the car and like in the back seat, like trembling. But somehow fireworks just like same noise, but somehow he is just completely non-bothered by fireworks. So
that is interesting.
It's a weird.
Also, I want to talk about one thing that's non-football before we get really into the weeds here. So there's this show that I keep seeing on my social media algorithm, Love Island. And it's like, have you heard about this?
I haven't watched a minute of it though.
So I Googled, what is Love Island? It's a reality dating show that originated in the UK. It gained immense popularity since 2015 when it debuted. It's a bunch of singles living together in a luxurious villa. They couple up, compete in challenges, blah, 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 blah. Seems to be all the rage. Everybody's talking about it.
It's funny. Last week I talked to my wife. I was like, "Do you watch Love Island? Have you seen this? Has it overtaken The Bachelor?" Because we were both on The Bachelor.
Yep.
And we're like, "Is this like the new hot thing?" Because probably a decade ago, The Bachelor was like, you see people in the football world like live tweeting that show. Yeah. Obviously not anymore. It's gone way downhill. And I'm hand up, my fault. But I see everyone talking about Love Island now.
So I came up with an idea that would be able to bring in a new demographic of fan. You talked about even football guys being in stretch lines talking about last night's episode of The Bachelor like 10 years ago. That was like a thing. Yeah. Well, what if we made a thing called Fight Island and we brought willing singles from the National Football League that are explosive personalities? I'm talking DBs, receivers, maybe some pass rushers. Get them on an island provide 6-star off-season training programs for them, and also give Hard Knocks style access to camera crews, and maybe a host to the off-season program. And I just want to see these guys. If you've ever been around DBs and receivers, first off, they never stop talking shit. But if the great thing about the NFL is everybody goes home at 6:00 and they get to cool off for a couple hours. Fight Island, you're all in a luxurious villa together training, and the cameras are there. So you gotta show your alpha, your gangster all the time.
I think, didn't we talked about this, I feel like, on an episode maybe in the spring, where we were discussing new revenues, new avenues for the NFL to make money, to like grow the product. And we threw out, sort of this barstool model where it's like you have NFL players in the off season competing on like reality TV shows.
Yeah.
Things of that nature. I feel like that's the logical next step for the NFL. You have so many of these guys who want to build their brands outside of what they do on the football field. I think there would be interest from not only player side, but also the fan side. I mean, obviously, anything that has NFL players associated with it is printing money for the NFL and for media. So I think that's a great next step. Now, physical competition.
How about,
it'd be hard pressed to get the owners on board, but I do think that is coming very soon to the NFL.
Fight Island, maybe coming to the UFL soon.
All right, let's get to, speaking of the U tier, the unknown tier. So we have the U tier first, F through A tiers, and then your S tier. There's a small U tier, but there are two teams, in my opinion, that we don't know. Yep. There's either too many new faces, too many guys coming back from injury that I just couldn't put them anywhere. And they are the Detroit Lions and the Arizona Cardinals. Detroit, the reason's obvious. You have Aiden Hutchinson coming back from a tib fib. You have Aleem McNeil coming back from a torn ACL. You have Marcus Davenport coming back from an elbow injury that ended his season in week 3 last year. So 3 of your starters are coming back from catastrophic injuries. And then you have, Tyreek Williams, who's a rookie. You have DJ Reader, who's over 30 years old at this point, like on the downside of his career. So there's a lot of unknown. I mean, if you just told me every single guy was fully healthy and would play the full season and was back to the form we last saw them in, this is truly an S tier unit. Like truly amongst the top 5 defensive front sevens in the NFL. But you can't promise me that right now, unfortunately. And I wish you could for Lions fans' sake, but without those guys, obviously, like, there's still a very deep defensive line. They have other guys coming in there. It's not going to be a problem, but I just didn't know where to rank them in this. And then for the Arizona Cardinals, just the amount of new faces there. Calais Campbell, not necessarily new for Cardinals fans, but like obviously his first year back there. Josh Sweat, Dalvin Tomlinson, Walter Nolan, Jordan Birch, and then BJ Ojulari coming back from injury. He obviously had an injury preseason. I think it was an ACL. Didn't play all last season. And then Akeem Davis-Gaither at linebacker as well. So all these new faces that I love for the Arizona Cardinals. I think they end up as a B tier or better defensive front seven, but just we have no clue at this point what it's going to look like because of that, because of how many guys we just didn't see in this jersey last year.
I'm in full agreement with you on these 2 units. And as we've seen with the other positional breakdowns, the U tier can mean a lot of different things. It's kind of like the Joker, the wild card. It could be bad, but it could also be great. Like you put my Chicago Bears in the U tier, which makes sense offensively because of all the changes. Well, there's a lot of changes in Detroit from a health standpoint. There's hardware in people's legs. There's new muscle groups trying to get recruited for Aleem McNeil. Marcus Davenport, is he going to be able to lock out with that elbow? What is it more of a, is it more of a joint issue where strength is the issue now, or is it a range of motion issue? Length equals strength. And if you don't have that length with your elbow being not healthy, I'd be interested to see. Reader, same thing. And for the Cardinals, all just the same guys, the same guys. They don't have the luxury of having all the same guys back like Detroit. They've got a bunch of new guys in there. It remains to be seen. And just the fact that Calais Campbell's still playing, we cover this often, but it's unbelievable. At the end of the day, for the Lions, are you healthy enough to show out? Because you do have the ability to be in that high B, A, maybe even play your way into S tier if Aiden Hutchinson returns to form, which is something that you and I have also talked about. He's going to get there, but it may not be this year.
Yeah. And with Davenport, to add a little more context, or like just it was a left elbow injury. And if you know anything about the Lions, you know Aiden Hutchinson plays on the left side. So he's going up against the right tackle. So that means Davenport's going to be exclusively on the right side. And any long arm, any sort of bull rush, any sort of rush entirely is predicated on that arm and the left elbow that he hurt. So if you were on the other side, it would be your right arm. But that is a big injury for a guy doing that. Like, there was a point in his career where Marcus Davenport, I thought, was going to be a real big time player. Obviously, he's had so many injuries over the course of his career, but if he could recapture it, like, there is the potential for eliteness here for the Lions. But I am just worried that those are all such big injuries that you may not get the exact same guys at this point in time. To flip to the Cardinals a little bit, I cannot, like, I've discussed this a lot, why I'm very high on them this year, why I do think they are a team that has as good a shot as anyone to win the West. I think the West, it was wide open a year ago. I think it's just as wide open after this offseason. I know the 49ers have the easiest schedule, but the Cardinals don't have that hard a schedule either. And to me, how much Jonathan Gannon cobbled everything together when he had zero defensive line, right? When he had no one, maybe not no one, but like Dennis Gardeck, who could rush the passer, how they still held the head above water defensively. Well, now they don't have to blitz to get pressure. Now I feel confident that this front four with, we haven't talked about Baron Browning, but throw him in there. He was a boon for them down the stretch last season with Zaven Collins as well. Like, they have enough bodies, they have enough depth that it isn't going to be a blitz heavy team. And you're not going to be putting this young secondary on islands near as much. I think we see a big time. I think there's a world where this Cardinals team is a top 10 defense because of the guy pulling the strings in Jonathan Gannon.
And they have different archetypes. We talk about this with the receiver position. You want different guys that can do different things within your offense. Well, the same thing goes for a defensive front. You want an absolute mauler that's going to rip people's faces off with explosion and get off. And whether they're getting stats or not, it doesn't matter. They're just causing chaos. And then you've got, obviously, Calais Campbell, who, even if he loses a rush, it's a potential win because he's 8 foot effing tall and he's just in the passing lanes. And also his length in the run game is exceptional. Josh Sweat, you need a real winner on the outside. So they went and they got that with Josh Sweat. And the Walter Nolan character is one of these do-it-all athlete types with great size and great strength. So if he can do a little bit of everything for this group, they could be great.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what the Cardinals look like this upcoming season. All right, there's your U tier. 2 teams. We're going to get through the F through A tier coming up right after this. All right, let's get to the F tier. I am going to roll through the names. I'm going to give a little explanation for it, and then you're going to give me who the most intriguing team of this group is in each tier, and then who you disagree with the most in terms of their placement. I will say, amongst all the exercises in terms of the position groups we've done so far, I feel like the tier is blurred together the most for me. It's just such a spectrum, and that's, I think, just a factor of how many people you're having to account for. It's not only your starting 4 defensive linemen, it's the couple of, the few guys who are going to be playing as role player backups. It's your, linebackers. So there is a lot of arguments to be made for these lists, and we'll get to, who I really struggle to rank when we get to them. So I'll start with this. Atlanta Falcons are in your F tier. This one doesn't seem too debatable. You are relying on, if you're relying on anyone to bring pressure. Now, Caden Ellis is awesome as an off-ball linebacker, one of the best blitzers in the league. I feel good about him still being able to do that. But you're relying on 2 rookie first-rounders who they themselves were not – this isn't like, they weren't Will Anderson coming out and Jalen Walker and James Pierce. These were guys who are, I don't want to say projects, but they were drafted for athletic tools, not for what they've already done on a football field. So Jalen Walker, James Pierce, Leonard Floyd, that's your edge group. Interior, Morgan Fox, David Onyemata, Ruka Rororo, that's your defensive interior. And then your linebacker group, Caden Ellis, Divine Diablo, Troy Anderson. I just don't see a ton of talent in terms of right now. 2 years from now, 3 years from now, sure. Right now, it's an F tier for me. Bengals, Not a lot of explanation necessary here. You got Trey Hendrickson and then some guys, right? What you're hoping is that former first rounder Myles Murphy, current first rounder Shamar Stewart, that they make plays, that they perform better than expectation. I haven't seen enough of Myles Murphy to excite me in that regard. He really has not done anything through 2 seasons, but obviously the learning curve is different for everyone in the NFL. That's your hope. Now, what we've seen from him at this point does not inspire me. Chris Jenkins on the interior as well. And then your linebacking group, it's Logan Wilson and then rookie second rounder Demetrius Knight, obviously lost. Cut Jermaine Pratt this offseason. So for the Bengals, it was an F tier last year. And to me, they haven't done enough to change that this year. Just Trey Hendrickson. Titans, also in this group. Your edge, Draymond Jones, Arden Key, Olu Oladejo. Draymond Jones, after switching from DT to edge for the Seahawks, he looked like a fish out of water. It's a tough transition to make. I don't know about you. Have you ever seen anyone make that transition successfully from DT to the edge?
I have seen a number of guys go from the edge to defensive tackle.
I think that's easier.
Like rushing over the B gap. I remember when Aaron Lynch, and Aaron Lynch is a guy that could be cut like a 3 technique, but he was athletic enough to play on the edge. When he came to Chicago, he moved inside because Khalil Mack was obviously rushing over the right tackle or wherever the hell he wanted. And I was like, this guy's unblockable. But I can't really imagine a defensive tackle moving out to edge. Maybe Red Bryant is one of those guys that was just gigantic and played on the edge in Seattle. Let me figure out how big he was. He was 6'5", 326. He was a D tackle, but he lined up at the edge and was just collapsing pockets. So if you want a guy that's just going to smush the pocket, great. But if you want somebody that can be a fully functional, cover the swing back, rush the passer, stay high side, don't lose contain, you're going to want these defensive ends, outside linebacker types.
Yeah, I remember Mike Neal made that transition for the Green Bay Packers. Never really worked out. It's just tough to do. And that's why, obviously, he's with the Titans now. At your interior, this is your saving grace for the Titans fans. Jeffrey Simmons, Devondre Sweat, one of the better interiors in the entire NFL. That's what you have to hang your hat on. After that, Cody Barton, Otis Reese at linebacker, not much to speak of there. And then your last team in the F tier, it's Carolina Panthers. I don't think I'm breaking any ground here. They were the worst defense in the NFL last season by a lot of metrics. A lot of it was obviously because Derek Brown went down. Hopefully your DTs look a lot different this year with him back. Turk Wharton now in the fold coming over from Kansas City. Your edge group, it's young. You drafted Nick Scorton in the second, Princely Emmanuel in the third. DJ Wanham is probably your best returning pass rusher, but he's nothing great to speak of. Your linebacker group of Trevin Wallace, Josie Jewell. This isn't anything. There's just no impact players. Your biggest impact player is coming off a major injury that made him miss all last season. So there is your 4 teams in the F tier.
Yeah, I mean, we're in agreement for most of these. The most intriguing one to me is the Atlanta Falcons. You talked about Jalen Walker, Leonard Floyd, James Pierce. You said a lot of these guys were drafted for their athleticism and their tools, their traits. I was there when we drafted Leonard Floyd in Chicago from the University of Georgia. And I remember getting a phone call from my dad being like, Kyle, you guys just got an absolute diamond level player because he can cover tight ends. He can, cover the swing running back. He's never going to get beat outside. He can run like a deer and he can rush the passer and plays the run with great length. All these guys are kind of that. And I put in my notes, all drafted for athleticism if they put it together type guys. Mm-hmm. Now, every unit should have probably one if they put it together type guy, but they don't need 3 of them. And if you're reliant on these guys who are do it all but do nothing exceptionally well, your unit is going to be exactly where you have them here in the F tier. The one group that I would have some disagreement with, just because I've played the interior of the offensive line, and I know how hard it is to move guys like Devondre Sweat and get after guys like Jeffrey Simmons week in, week out. I do think that health and obviously health on the back end of this defense and success of the offense will be a huge determining factor for how this unit can play, because Jeffrey Simmons on third down is tough to handle, obviously in the run game as well.
Yeah, I agree with the Falcons for sure. I think that, today's NFL, these athletes, I think it's easier for them to make an impact right away just because of what defense they're doing on third down, or on pass downs. And not even third down. We say third down, but like passing situations,
Second
sometimes
and
even
7.
second down. Yeah. Like it's completely changed how defense coordinators approach, calling their defenses in today's day and age. That just like you run a lot of rushes for edge guys like a Jalen Walker, like a James Pierce. It's kind of just be an athlete. When you're looping on the interior on a stunt, it's just about how fast can you get there, and those guys can get there in a hurry. So I trust Raheem Morris to put them in a position to succeed right away. Let's get to the D tier. Short D tier, small D tier. Only 3 teams. That did not say that correctly, but they're the Los Angeles Chargers. Are your first team. They have the worst interior defensive group in the NFL. You obviously have Khalil Mack. Tuli Pelotu isn't a bad player, even if he's not
I like him.
High-end pass rusher. He's a solid player. The saving grace for them to get them out of the F tier was their linebacker group, in my opinion. One of the best in this regard in the NFL. Junior Colson, Diane Henley, Denzel Perriman, an A-plus unit. But I am worried about that defensive interior. That's why they get into the D tier. Commanders, Dorrance Armstrong, Dietrich Wise, your edge rushers. Interior, Deron Payne, Javon Kinlaw, Johnny Newton. Your saving grace, another team where this linebacking core suite against the run, great pass rushers. It is a Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner make this unit all work with what they can do on the second level, but still not a true one-on-one winning sort of defensive line. Hopefully Johnny Newton can change that in year 2, but we shall see. And then Dolphins are the last one. And this one's just because of injury. You have Bradley Chubb, who didn't play all last year after an ACL. You have Jalen Phillips, who just tore his ACL. Like, that is who you're hanging your hat on. Chop Robinson, awesome for rookie. I expect a step from him in year 2. He's going to be an impact player on the edge. Zach Sealer, an impact player on the interior. Jordan Brooks, a great run defender at the second level. Like, they have players in this unit for sure, but just too many question marks, too many holes. I can see an argument for them being higher, but for right now, they're going in the D tier.
Well, look, there's some really good players on this list. And as we've seen with the other position groups, you could have really good players and still end up towards the bottom of this tier list because it's all about the unit. It's about what you do in combination with one another. I do like what the Chargers have going on with the edge there. And Tui did a great job last year filling in when guys went down. He showed that Tuli can really get after the quarterback. Khalil Mack is the Adonis that continues to just do his thing. I'm not even going to talk about the Commanders, but you know what? I will. It's the linebackers. It's Louvu and it's Wagner. And I remember playing against the Vikings defense when Zimmer was the coach. It was Anthony Barr, and it was, Eric Kendricks. And they never had world-beating defensive fronts. The front four were never world-beating guys, but with their double-A mug ability, their ability to muddy up the run game, be in the passing lanes, it was frustrating to play against that type of defense. So regardless of who the Commanders have up front, I know with those 2 linebackers and their multiplicity, their ability to do so many things and set the tone, it'll be great. Same thing with a guy like Deion Henley in Los Angeles. He's all over the field, a lot of fun to watch.
All right, let's get to the C tier. A lot of teams here. We have 6 in the C tier. Chicago Bears lead it off. They have depth. I will give them. They get in the C tier because they go probably 6 or so deep with quality players. They just don't have a dude at this point in time. Gervon, he could get there, right? We've seen Montez Sweat be that guy in years past. Absolutely was not last year. Their linebackers are solid, not spectacular. So there's no impact guy in this unit. It is, I think, the biggest thing missing that can get them to the next level, to the B tier, to the A tier, where pretty much all those teams have a dude in their units. Bears right now are just solid. Now, you can win games like that, but again, I don't think anyone's going into a Chicago Bears team and being like, oh man, we got to prepare for this defensive line at this point. Indianapolis Colts make this tier as well. Probably the one team that I think could push higher just because they have a lot of young guys I like, but just at this point in time, not ready to put them there. They've invested a lot in this edge group. Kwity Paye, a former first rounder. Latu, a first rounder a year ago. Samson Ebukam, JT Tuimoloau, second rounder this year. has potential. We'll see if they get results. Obviously, their interior is great with Grover Stewart, DeForest Buckner, average linebackers, and Jalen Carleys and Zaire Franklin. New Orleans Saints I put in this tier with Chase Young, Carl Granderson, Cam Jordan off the edge. I'm hoping Brian Brzee takes a big step. I liked him coming out of Clemson. I knew he was a little bit raw, a little bit of a project. He has flashed through 2 seasons, never quite put it all together. If he takes the next step, this could be a B-tier unit for sure. Pete Werner, Demario Davis, your linebackers. Demario Davis, dude, is going to be 36 years old this season. What a marvel he has been over the course of his career. Still, dude, right? Still getting it done at that age. San Francisco 49ers make this tier. They were probably a D-tier unit a season ago, even with Nick Bosa and Fred Warner, 2 stars in this unit, but then a lot of question marks after that. Pretty much all question marks after that. Michael Williams, Bryce Huff, your edge rushers, Jordan Elliott, Alfred Collins, CJ West, Evan Anderson, your DTs, and then D. Winters, Nick Martin, your other linebackers. Can you point to a single one of those guys and be like, I know he's going to be good this year? You just can't, unfortunately. That's the nature of this 49ers team, and that's why they put them in the C tier here. New England Patriots I put in this tier. Probably a far cry from where they were a year ago. One of the worst run defenses in the NFL. But
here comes the cavalry.
Christian Barmore back. Milton Williams signed this offseason. Robert Spillane signed this offseason.
Huge.
And then Keon White going into year 3 off the edge. I think this will be a much improved unit this year. And last but not least, the Kansas City Chiefs make this C tier. Another team with some stars. Obviously, we know George Karlaftis. We know Chris Jones. Chris Jones, he's 31, but he's ageless. He's still like at the top of his game from what we've seen from him. Your linebacker unit, one of the best linebacker units in the NFL with 3 different skill sets, Nick Bolton, Drew Tranquil, Leo Chanel. But outside of Chris Jones, George Karlaftis, who else is making an impact on this defensive line? You lost Turk Wharton. Is Mike Dana going to be that guy? Is Felix Anudike-Uzomah finally going to show up? Is Charles Omenihu going to be an impact player? Mike Pennell, Jerry Tillery, Omar Norman-Lott, your second rounder? I don't know. And because of that, they're a C-tier unit.
This just feels like a classic Spags put it together and make it work type defense.
Yeah.
Chris Jones
they're going to get results.
Chaos. Look, Mike Dana makes plays in the playoffs. Mike Dana is the one guy that doesn't get accounted for in the scheming meeting, and he somehow ends up with a 101 or unblocked on a loop, a stunt, something. I'll talk about the Bears first. They need way more from Sweat. You touched on it. They got a lot from Dexter, and I feel like if Sweat and Dexter can have some synchronicity there with both of them winning, it could be chaotic in some certain backfields. Billings, when healthy, and I know he had a big injury last year, when healthy, Billings is a killer, and he's an underappreciated big in the National Football League. I think that the 2 linebackers with Edwards and Edmonds can be must-see TV. Edwards is all over the field. He was one of my favorite signings recently with Chicago, and watching him make all those plays last year, a lot of fun. I would say the Bears have the ability, if Montez Sweat can play up to what he's being paid, to jump into, at the very least, the B tier. And I know we're only talking about front 7, but you got to keep in mind they've got a good back end. They've got a new coordinator who's, people would say he's equally as good as the previous one who did a good job. Things could be looking up for Chicago.
I think about Chicago is, of all these teams in the C tier, I think their floor is the C tier. They can survive injuries at positions. Like, they have the best depth of any of these units, in my opinion.
And Deo Dengbo is for his Buckner size. That's why we signed him. We wanted a big physical mismatch. Well, you got one. If you can show up and just put some things together, it could be a lot of fun to watch this group.
All right, let's get to the B tier here. Loaded B tier. And I think every B tier fan base is going to come at me and say we're A tier. And this is where it got tough for me, because for the A tier, I was really looking for, truly like getting elite players. To make the A tier, I wanted a team that either had incredible depth or some elite players that change the game so much that they have to be accounted for. If you didn't quite have that, you made the B tier. But you can make arguments that any of these units, pretty much all these that I'm going to talk about, could make the A tier. And I'd probably nod along. I'd probably be like, yeah, there's a lot of talent here, but we just need to see it. And they are, the teams. The Baltimore Ravens, to start off, very deep defensive line. Kyle Van Noy, Odafe Owe, Mike Green, your second rounder, David Ajabo, former second rounder on the edge, Travis Jones, Nnamdi Matabuke, one of the better interiors in the NFL at DT, and then Roquan Smith, Trenton Simpson. Like, there is a lot to like here. I just think it's a B tier unit. Borderline A tier, but B tier unit.
They're going to hate you in Baltimore.
They are. Buffalo Bills in this one as well. Greg Rousseau, Joey Bosa now, Michael Hoyt, AJ Epinesa off the edge, Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, Larry Ogunjobi, your second rounder, TJ Sanders on the interior. Then your linebacker core of Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard, Dorian Williams. I love what they did this offseason, rebuilding it for kind of cheap. Of all these teams, though, I think this was the most borderline. I just don't know what I'm going to get from Joey Bosa. Joey Bosa is healthy. Joey Bosa is the one we know and love. This is a solid B tier team to possibly A tier, but this one needs to prove it. Cowboys in this tier as well. Micah Parsons, Osa Odighizuwa, obviously your headliners. But after that, I'm really worried about this linebacking core. Obviously, DeMarvion Overshown, unlikely to play after that gruesome injury he had towards the end of last season. So Kenneth Murray, Maris Leafau, Jack Sanborn. What are those guys going to look like? Now, they have some depth on the edge, some young guys that could, across this defensive line, whether it's Mozzie Smith, your former first rounder on the interior, whether it's Sam Williams, whether it's Marshawn Nealon, Donovan Ezeraku. They've invested a lot. It's just, where will they be this upcoming season? Remains to be seen. But I put them in the B tier. Like I said, I'm going to make a lot of people mad with this B tier. Green Bay Packers are in the B tier as well. You know, all the former first rounders. 5 former first rounders in this front seven. Rashawn Gary, Lucas Van Ness, Kenny Clark, Devontae Wyatt, Quay Walker. Alongside Carl Brooks, Kobe Wooden, Edgerrin Cooper, Kingsley Enagbare. It's like they are solid across the board. But Rashawn Gary is not a high-end impact guy. Kenny Clark's no longer a high-end impact guy. They are just like solid across the board. Edgerrin Cooper might be your saving grace because he looked like down the stretch last year a true dude, especially as a pass rusher, especially in the running game. Jacksonville Jaguars I put in this tier. Trayvon Walker, Josh Hines-Allen off the edge. I worry about their interior a little bit. Devon Hamilton, Mason Smith, Eric Armstead. But then one of the better linebacking cores in the NFL with Devin Lloyd, Foye Oluokun. Seattle Seahawks in this tier as well. One of the deepest defensive lines in the NFL. Just Derek Hall, Chiney Nwosu, Boye Mafe, DeMarcus Lawrence, Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, Jerron Reed. Whew. I mean, like their second string is still a very capable unit, but another team where it's like, who's the one guy who's a game changer? Could Byron Murphy be that? I thought he was going to be that coming out of Texas. We'll see. Ernest Jones, Tyrese Knight, your linebacking core, but still just feels like a little bit of a B tier unit. Tampa Bay Bucks in this tier as well. Another team that just sends out a ton of guys, but I do worry about this linebacking core at this point. Levante David, Servassier Dennis. David at this point, not a great run defender, just really limited. So, Tampa Bay Bucks, and then your last team in this tier is the Houston Texans. Obviously, everyone knows Daniil Hunter, Will Anderson. It's just after that, you got nothing else to write home about. There is not another impact player in this front seven. Those guys do a lot of heavy lifting, and that got them to this tier. But if they had anyone else, this would be an A tier unit for me, but they end up in the B tier. So, a lot to chew on there. And like I said, I think I'm going to make a lot of those fan bases mad. But all of them, for one reason or another, just fall short of we'll see when we get to the A tier.
Okay, there's two groups that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the Bills, and I'm going to talk about the Texans. And I'm going to talk about the Bills because of this. Okay, Michael Hoyt and Larry Ogunjobi, both of those guys got in trouble for PEDs.
Juicing.
They're going to miss 6 games, which means they're going to be fresh. I don't know if
they're going to come back and play the best football of their lives. That's
I don't know if you've ever seen Matt Milano before, and I would never accuse somebody of being on PEDs, but my God, he has natural PEDs. The Lord gave him natural PEDs. That's just, and he plays the game of football that way. Ed Oliver is kind of built the same way. He's just like a little strongman competition type. This defense is going to bow up on a lot of people, and I think that they are going to play their way into the A tier. The other group I think could play their way into the A tier is the Houston Texans. they have two fire-breathing dragons rushing the passer off the edge. That alone is enough
Yeah.
to, invoke fear into the away team's hotels on Saturday night. That's just the way that it goes. And that ain't all they got. They got guys up the middle as well. And obviously Aziz Al-Shair is a guy that strikes fear into the hearts of a lot of offensive players as well. We saw what happened to Trevor Lawrence. I don't expect him to change the way that he plays. I don't expect D'Amico Ryans to tell these guys to change the way that they play. The Houston Texans is one of these units, like the Ravens. Historically, they've struck fear into the hearts of their opponents. And I think that this Houston Texans team can, and it's all predicated on their ability to get after the quarterback off the edges.
Yeah, the Texans were a very difficult team for me to rank because I don't think there's an edge duo in the NFL, just at least for this season, you'd rather have, right? I think it is probably the best in the league. But how much does that, and it matters a lot, right? I've said before that if you have two offensive tackles, you have a good offensive line. If you have two elite offensive tackles, you have a good offensive line. If you have two elite pass rushers, you have a great defensive line. Like it really doesn't matter. You could throw backups at the defensive tackle position. It'll be a tough unit to stop just by the nature of how, rushing the passer works. But they basically have backups. They have guys who were for other teams, guys like Tim Settle, guys like Sheldon Rankins now at this point in his career, Fola Futakasi, that they're backups, unfortunately. So we'll see. It was
good back end. I know this isn't a back end discussion.
I'll just say there is no shame in being in the B tier because, as we'll see when we get to the A tier, there are some loaded defensive lines around the NFL coming up right after this. All right, A tier, starting with the Cleveland Browns. And this is basically it's a lot of Myles Garrett, right? I would feel better about this unit if they had Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Obviously, with his neck injury, he's not going to be playing this year. Your linebackers then are Jordan Hicks, Carson Schwessinger, your second rounder. But I kind of like some of the other guys on this defensive line enough that I put him here. I could see arguments to make him a B-tier unit, but one, Myles Garrett is so unstoppable that he changed the game all by himself. The single most impactful defensive lineman in the NFL right now. But then I like what I saw from Isaiah McGuire. I thought Alex Wright was on pace for a breakout season before he got hurt last year. Mason Graham, obviously a top 5 pick, looks like an NFL-ready run defender at minimum. Malik Collins can rush the passer on the interior. Mike Hall Jr. going into year 2 can rush the passer on the interior. Like, there are names on this list that maybe aren't household names that I think people are going to hear more and more of this year and respect their game a little bit more. So there's a lot more talent here than just Myles Garrett, but obviously Myles Garrett is the reason why they make this tier. Los Angeles Rams in this one as well. Not a lot of explanation necessary here. And it's not only that they're talented, it's the way they scheme up that defensive line to take advantage of that talent. And they added Poona Ford to this unit. They have this unbelievably high leverage sort of unit that has a bunch of Poona Ford's 5'11", Kobe Turner's 6 foot, Byron Young 6'1", Josiah Stewart they just drafted 6 foot. They are guys who just
monsters.
Leverage exactly. So
they watched Aaron Donald forklift players for 10 years, and they're like, "Well, we just need to get short D linemen."
That's what they built the entire defensive sort of front seven, or like their ethos is just guys who can reset the line of scrimmage is what they're all trying to do on every single play. They're just trying to create havoc and make sure the offensive line goes backwards. And lo and behold, that strategy worked out down the stretch last year. They were a monster towards the end of last season. And all these guys are at the point in their careers where they should only be getting better. I haven't mentioned a guy, Poona Ford's the only one I've mentioned who's beyond year 4 in the NFL. So it's a unit that's only improving at this point in time. Las Vegas Raiders.
That's been the case for the Rams for a long time, though. I remember back to when my older brother was drafted in like 2007, and it felt like for the next decade they just invested their
D-line.
Their D
Michael
line.
Brockers.
Yeah, and I mean it was Brockers, it
Robert
was
Quinn.
Chris Quinn, Aaron Donald. I mean, it
Donald.
was staggering how tough. And I remember playing against that group, being like, "What can you do? We're all going 1-on-1 against guys who are real winners." And they've got that. Jared Verse is my favorite one of the group, though. He reminds me of Khalil Mack. He reminds me a lot of Khalil Mack.
And he was already a dude as a rookie, which is a rarity off the edge in the NFL. Khalil Mack wasn't even a dude as a rookie. Khalil Mack came in the NFL and was not what Jared Verse was in year one. All right, Las Vegas Raiders, next team on this list. We never got to see it last year. Obviously, Christian Wilkins goes down. Malcolm Kuntz goes down. But I think this unit this year is primed to be a dominant one. Max Crosby, the aforementioned guys, Tyree Wilson going into year 3 was always kind of a project. He's hitting kind of the stride, the year that is kind of the make or break year for most of these projects or defensive linemen. And then they have kind of an ass-kicking second level. Like Landon Roberts, not a coverage player whatsoever. That guy can fill the run. Jermaine Pratt as well, they added from Cincinnati Bengals. So I think that unit is going to be, knock on wood, at full strength and kick some ass this upcoming season. New York Jets in this tier as well, obviously hoping for some guys come back from injury like Jermaine Johnson, who was, when healthy, very much of an impact player, but tore his Achilles last season. Will McDonald, big leap from year 1 to year 2. He is a third down sort of specialist, even though he had to play like all 4 downs a year ago. Hopefully that's not the case with Johnson back this season. Quinnen Williams, no explanation necessary there, even if he's been kind of up and down over the course of his career. But then their second level is awesome. Jamin Sherwood, Quincy Williams, those guys can blitz. Those guys can play the run. They are one of the best, top 3 linebacking core in the NFL. That puts them in the A tier. And then last, and this is the one that hurt the most to keep from the S tier, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. And it's because of age. I'll just say it. It was an A tier, S tier unit last year. It is just TJ Watt is 30. Cam Hayward is 36. Are they still going to keep up the level of play we've known to come to expect from those guys? I don't know. It's going to be difficult to do so. It gets difficult when you hit, when you tick over 30, when you tick to 36, the way Hayward has. But they have up-and-comers too. I mean, Alex Highsmith, Nick Herbig off the edge, Keanu Benton, Derek Harmon, your first rounder. The other thing, though, that kept me from ranking them in the S tier, linebacking core, Patrick Queen, Peyton Wilson, they can cover ground. One of the fast linebacking cores in the NFL. You get hands on them, they are liabilities in the running game. They are not those type of linebackers. So that's for all those reasons. It is an A tier unit for me.
Yeah, that's tough. The Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, TJ Watt's availability hasn't been in question, though. And Cam Hayward's a guy at 36 that seems like age is just a number for him. But to your point, Peyton Wilson is, he's kind of got that cross-country build to him. You get your hands on him, you can take him in the woods a little bit. Patrick Queen, obviously a good player, and I think Peyton Wilson will do a good job stepping in and being the guy next to Patrick Queen. He was obviously great in college, but these are grown-ass men in the National Football League, particularly in that division. I think that the unit that can play into the S tier is the Rams, though. And like you said, so much youth in that room, so much talent, and also so much scheme thought put into what these guys are going to do in order to win. I think they're the group that can play their way into the S tier.
Yeah, I'm excited to see this Rams team. One, because I've been probably since I started doing draft analysis, I've always been higher on the Kobe Turner types. I mean, I had Kobe Turner as like the 70th ranked player on my board when he wasn't in the top 100 consensus. The Puna 4 types. Like, I've always thought that those guys get underrated by the league. I know why they do, but I was like, if you, I don't know, let's say scheme around them. You don't want to always scheme around one guy, but like, if you have a scheme that is such that can take advantage of them, they are very difficult players to stop. They are guys that can make a big impact. And the Rams kind of just leaned into that entire idea and even did so again this offseason with Puna Ford, with Josiah Stewart. Like, they're just like, we just want guys who can be these, even if they're undersized, who can just create havoc. And
winners. You want winners.
Guys who can win.
Dude, when I was in Kansas City, the guy that I had my antennae up about obviously was number 95, Chris Jones. And you had to go to practice and bring your sword and shield and just get absolutely fire breathed down upon you from this dragon. But then when he went to get some water, or if, maybe he lined up on the other side, you had to play against Tershawn Wharton, and he's undersized. Now, if we're in the run period, I'm licking my chops to go against Turk. Me and Creed are going to take this guy for a ride. But you get a guy like that in a pass situation where you have to slide to Jared Verse, and you get a guy like, any of these dudes for the Los Angeles Rams in one-on-one situations, the undersized stuff is tough. It's a smaller target. You can't get your hands on them. They have natural leverage. It is a not fun place to be as an offensive lineman when you're playing against somebody particularly shorter than you.
And if I could just go on a little tangent here about why I think these guys are going to become more prevalent, why I think more teams will follow the Rams model, and just why it's becoming more popular in general, is that for years and years and years, the NFL used to match numbers with their front sevens, right? Or with their box defenders. For each gap, there was a player who was assigned that gap in terms of their responsibility. But with the explosion of the passing game and just the proliferation of it through the mid-2010s and just people realizing the advent and how much play action can be a weapon, all of a sudden it started to be like, oh, we actually need to put more numbers in the secondary. If we put more numbers in the secondary, we limit explosive plays. We can afford to let the running game kill us a little bit. It just isn't as valuable. People started to realize that. So they started to scheme up that way. Then they also realized that, when we don't have the box number count and we still try to play numbers, we still try to make a guy 2-gap or something of that nature, that we're kind of just ceding 3 to 4 yards every time. It's a difficult brand of football to still try to play, hold your gap and when you're down a man. So what defenses realized was we would rather create one negative run and give up one explosive run than just give up 4 straight runs of 4 to 6 yards, right? You can afford, because the negative runs will take you out of the down and distance. That was the biggest thing, was try to take teams out of the down distance. So a lot of run defenses around the NFL now on those early downs or second downs, things of that nature that are traditionally run downs, they are trying to create a negative play and aren't worried about, if we leave this gap open, they aren't worried about gap control nearly as much, where if we leave this gap open, it's going to burst down to a 15, 20-yard gain.
Yeah.
Well, when you have 2 safeties deep, you have multiple guys to account for those big plays.
It's going to be a 7-yard gain at most, but we stand to gain a ton as a defense. We might create a turnover. We might get an explosive loss of play.
So the formerly, when you didn't have gap control, when you had 8 guys in the box, there was only that one safety deep to come help.
That's where the 70-yard slants happen.
Exactly. So that's when you have these big plays, the explosive turn big plays. But now when you have a light box and all the guys deep, or all the guys, in the secondary, if that box,
you just shell around everything.
Exactly. If that's 6, 7 guys,
bend, don't break. It's like, we can afford to bend a little bit, but like, we're going to keep it all in front of us. They're going to have to do it 9 times in a row and get it right in order for them to have success.
Yes. And so they basically, what defenses try to do now is they'll give you the explosive play knowing we have 2 safeties back there. We got a nickel corner who that explosive run is like a 12, 15-yarder. It's not going to be a 70-yarder. Now, obviously, that didn't work against Philadelphia Eagles because their D-line was getting their ass kicked still, and they gave up like 2 70-yarders, right? But against most teams, when you can't create that havoc, they'll create negative runs, give up some explosive runs. But the theory is that if we get a negative run on an early down, it is so much more valuable. It leads to so many more 3-and-outs or turnovers or things of that nature than just trying to play gap control. So it's a different philosophical change than we've seen in years past. And I think it's only going to grow more prevalent around the NFL. All right. We're going to take not take a quick break. We're going to get to the S tier. Last tier. Rolling in. Final 4 teams. It's the Broncos, it's the Vikings, it's the Giants, it's the Eagles. I don't think I'm breaking any ground here with any of these teams. The one team that is obviously the newest addition, because the Broncos last year, this was the number 1 pass defense, number 3 run defense. Vikings, number 1 run defense. I don't even need to talk about the Eagles last year. Obviously, they lost a couple guys, a couple big names, probably 3 big names from that defense. If you count Nakobe Dean, who's probably not going to play this year with the torn patellar tendon. You lost Milton Williams, defensive tackle. You lost Josh Sweat. But Moro Jomo, if people don't know that guy's name, he is going to step in for Milton Williams and going to be a massive impact player this upcoming season for him. Already was a year ago. Jihad Campbell is obviously going to step in for Nakobe Dean, so maybe not a huge downgrade there. And then they backfilled with Azeez Ojulari, Josh Uche in free agency, and then they have J. Alex Hunt coming up, your third rounder from a season ago. So I don't think the Eagles are going anywhere in this dominant front seven. But it's the New York Giants that are the one addition where it's like they weren't here a year ago, but I would bet my house that they're going to be there this year. Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, obviously KT going into year 4, still improving. He took a big step forward last year, but he may be a third fiddle here because Abdul Carter is going to come in right away and be a player for this team. Chauncey Golston as well, they added him free agency coming over from Dallas. Dexter Lawrence missed some time last year. He's the best nose tackle in the NFL. It's not a debate. Truly one of the best modern nose tackles of the past, 25 years. For my money, the best nose tackle, best pass rushing nose tackle I have ever seen. If he's back healthy,
Wow.
he is going to cause a lot of sacks for Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, Kayvon Thibodeau. Darius Alexander, they add as well, second rounder. And then your linebackers, Bobby Okereke and Micah McFadden. So I think it's an S-tier defensive line. They have the elite talent in guys like Dexter Lawrence. They have the depth with those 3 edge rushers. I just think this is a unit primed to be amongst the best in the NFL.
Yeah. I mean, who do you help when you're playing against the Giants? Like
that third down. So if you're third down,
dude,
you're throwing out Dexter Lawrence, Brian
the
Burns,
hotel
Kayvon Thibodeau.
Saturday night, and I often reference this. This is the type of matchup where we're sitting there. We're all at those white tablecloth circular tables in the hotel banquet rooms. Close your eyes. We've all been there in a banquet room at a hotel. There's 30 tables. There's every player is in there eating after meetings, and guys are talking about the game tomorrow. And the O-line is over there laughing hysterically, and everybody's like, "What's so funny?" And they're like, "We're trying to figure out who gets the slide when." You know what I'm saying? Like, this guy wants help. So does he. The center wants help. The guard wants help. Nobody has a great plan when you're playing against a team like the New York Giants. And you talked about how important Dexter Lawrence is. And I'll start with Dexter Lawrence because that's where it starts for protection. It's the middle of the formation. It's the point closest to the quarterback. And if you've got a real shit disturber on the inside like Dexter Lawrence, who you put it so eloquently as saying he was the best pass rushing nose tackle you've seen in memory. That's unbelievable. It opens the door for these guys on the edge. And the fact that Kayvon Thibodeau is the third fiddle in this band is unbelievable. I saw a clip of these guys in the spring, mesh shorts, spider pads, helmets. All 4 of the linemen won. My biggest question for this unit is, will they be good enough to have this team being competitive every week? Because we know there's questions on the offensive side of the ball. But I can't think of a more striking front seven in terms of third down. Who do you not want to play? I don't want to play the Giants. Broncos are going to get it done in a number of different ways. We loved Zach Allen last year. He was fantastic. Nick Bonito is a matchup nightmare on the edge because of his explosion and his slim frame, his ability to get around the edge. Really like that group a lot. And if they have health for the guys they're bringing in with Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga, they've got even more help there. And, Hufanga, we'll count him in the front 7 rankings because that guy is down there a lot. But yeah, this is great, the S tier. And some would argue that this Vikings team is quietly the best one of the bunch. But, a lot of those people have Midwest accents.
It'll be interesting to see because obviously, they had S tier results a year ago. I think a lot of people thought they outplayed their results, but then they added Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave. Obviously 2 guys who were injured last year. You're flipping a coin kind of. You never know what you're going to get. That's why they got them as cheap as they did. But if they get the guys they were when healthy, when we last saw them healthy, shoot, man, that will be this at least is like the defensive line that has the least skips, right? You're going Andrew Van Ginkel, Jonathan Grenard, Dallas Turner, Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, Harris Phillips, Blake Cashman, Ivan Pace. Like, none of those guys you are even close to worried about doing their job. They are all above average players at what they were asked to do.
It ain't the front seven they're worried about in Minnesota, though. It's Brian Flores' little headhunters on the back end. Yes. They got to figure out who the hell's going to be playing back there.
Which is a good segue because we'll be getting to secondary on Wednesday's show with Brock Vereen. Brock Vereen's going to be taking over. Kyle's going to be.
I'm getting my right shoulder cleaned up a little bit. Okay, it's a labrum arthroscopy surgery. It's an arthroscopic labrum repair. Not a repair. They're cleaning it out. They're buffing it out. I got some rust. They got to take it out.
I was gonna say it's not even your throwing shoulder that you get.
No.
It was that outside? Good, was that an outside hand injury? Was that getting?
So this shoulder, the left shoulder, I tore in New England during contract talks at training camp. I punched a shade. I went down on a shade, and he went back outside, and I held on to him, and it felt like a Carnival cruise ship rope snapped in my shoulder. I knew my shoulder was, but I played the whole year. Got a big deal. Got a big contract maybe on that bad shoulder. And then I retired in 2020 and I went to Montana and I was on my brother's dock and there was big waves coming up on the dock and my dog Bear jumped in the water and he was going to get smacked into the seawall. So I jumped in to get him, brought him out. I stood up, my feet slipped out from under me and landed like this. And my shoulder went bang. I just felt the same thing in this shoulder, but this way instead of across. Yeah. So I've got 2 torn labrums. This one has been scoped. This one's getting scoped tomorrow, baby.
Well, best of luck to you. And thanks so much to you guys for tuning in. We'll be back Wednesday with that Back 7 rankings. Until then, keep pushing.